He already knew I wasn't coming in. He'd already heard his other phone ring. I want to back up and tell you how I ended up on a county road in North Georgia at night with no witnesses and a man standing in a doorway waiting for me. I'd been selling things off since the move, a Bray cup, she kept the good stuff. I kept what was left, a sectional that wouldn't fit the new place, a portable air conditioner, an old Milwaukee tool chest I'd been hauling around in the bed of my Ram 1500 for 3 weeks because I kept forgetting to list it. That last one is what this story is about. I put it on Facebook Marketplace sometime in September. $80, 3-drawer steel chest, red, some surface rust on the corners, drawers slid fine. I got a few nibbles, nobody followed through. Then this guy messaged me. His profile name was Dale H. No photo. Account looked recent. He asked if the chest was still available. I said yes. He said he'd take it for asking price, cash, and could I deliver. I told him I had a full-size bed in the truck and I could swing it for an extra 10 in gas. He said that worked. His first message said he was in Kennesaw, northwest of Atlanta, maybe 30 minutes from me, reasonable. He asked about the drawer slides, asked if the lock on the top tray still worked, normal questions, the kind a person asks when they actually want the thing. We agreed on Saturday afternoon, around 2. Then Saturday morning he pushed it to evening, 7 or 8. He said he'd send the address when he got home. He sent it around 5, I plugged it in. It put me on a county road out past Acworth, almost to the Bartow County line, further than Kennesaw, maybe 45 minutes. I messaged and said I thought he was in Kennesaw. He said he'd been staying at his brother's place. That sounded fine. People say that kind of thing. I loaded the chest into the bed around 6:30. The metal was cold even through my gloves. The evening had turned fast, a front had moved through, and the temperature had dropped maybe 15 degrees since noon. October in Georgia can do that. I stopped at the QT on Barrett Parkway to top off the tank. The parking lot was bright and loud and warm with that last bit of day. Everything felt normal at that point. I got back on the road around 7:15. He messaged again at 7:40. New address, forget the first one, use this instead. I pulled into a Kroger lot and looked it up. The new pin landed in what looked like solid woods, no street view. The road didn't even have a name, just a route number, CR 294. The satellite image showed unbroken tree canopy, no way to tell if there was a structure under it or just more trees. I sat there for a second. I messaged him and said the pin looked off. He said maps was wrong, new development, GPS always screws it up. Just follow the road until you see a mailbox with the number. Here's the thing about that moment, I wasn't scared yet, I was annoyed. The drive was already longer than I'd planned and now he was moving the address on me. I almost baited just out of irritation. But rent was due in 4 days. I had maybe $60 to my name. 85 felt real. I got back on the road and headed north. Past the highway, past the subdivisions, past the last commercial strip. The roads went quiet fast. My radio signal dropped somewhere around Waleska and I didn't bother finding something else. By the time I turned onto CR 294, it was past 8. The sun was gone, not full dark yet, that gray-blue window right before it goes black, and the trees were close on both sides. No streetlights, just a small white sign at the turnoff, one corner bent down, the number barely readable. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The air through my cracked window smelled like creek water and pine and cold clay. Sound dropped off the way it does under heavy tree cover. My tires on the asphalt were loud, everything else was not. I drove slow. About half a mile in, I noticed headlights in my rear view, not close, but keeping pace. I sped up slightly. They sped up, I slowed, they slowed. Maybe nothing, it was a road. But I hadn't passed a single turnoff. I messaged Dale while I was moving, I know, dumb, just a quick how far down is it? He replied almost instantly, just around the curve, keep going. There was no mailbox around the curve. There was a gravel pull-off and a double-wide with one light on in the front window, a bare bulb behind thin curtains, that kind of light that doesn't reach outside, it just tells you someone's awake in there. No porch light, no other vehicles, a rusted propane tank at the corner of the skirting, a folded plastic lawn chair against the wall. The headlights behind me slowed and stopped about 60 yards back. I didn't pull in. I rolled past at about 10 miles an hour, watching. The front door opened while I was still moving. A man stepped onto the stoop. He didn't wave. He didn't look at my truck the way a buyer looks when you're arriving with their item. He just stood there, arms loose. Still, he was backlit by that single bulb and I couldn't make out his face, just a shape, a silhouette of a person standing in a way that felt practiced, not waiting. watching. There was no transaction in his posture at all. I kept rolling. My phone buzzed. Dale, that's the place. You passed it. I pulled over about 100 yards past the house, engine ticking. The headlights behind me hadn't moved. Somewhere in the trees to my left, something was moving through brush, probably deer, but the sound of it made me aware of how quiet everything else was. No dogs, no traffic, nothing. Just that dry crackle in the dark and the low idle of my truck. I picked up my phone and looked at Dale's profile again. Account created 6 weeks ago. No other listings, no ratings, no photo. I called the number he'd been texting from. A different phone rang, somewhere behind me, not loud, but I heard it through my open window. One ring, then silence. I went cold. That's the moment, that's when I stopped looking for a normal explanation. He was in the car behind me. He had been behind me for the last mile. He had been running 2 phones, the listed number and whatever he was actually holding, and when I called the listed number, it rang in that car 60 yards back. The listing, the questions about the drawers, the changed addresses, all of it was logistics, getting me down a dead-end road at night with no witnesses. CR 294 had one way in and one way out. I'd verified that myself. No turnoffs, nobody coming. I didn't think clearly after that, I just acted. I put the Ram in drive. I kept my headlights off for the first 20 seconds. I didn't want him to see me move before I had speed. Then I turned them on and I drove. I didn't look at my phone, I didn't message anyone. I just drove and watched the rear view. His headlights came on about 10 seconds after I moved. They came fast. I hit the end of CR 294 and made the turn without slowing. I ran the next 2 miles to the main road doing 50 on a road that wanted 30. The tree line blurred on both sides. My headlights bounced on the uneven asphalt. I remember tightening my grip on the wheel and not thinking in words, just moving, just getting out. By the time I reached the stoplight at the highway, the headlights were gone. I sat at that light for probably 2 full minutes, hands on the wheel, watching. Nothing. I drove home, didn't stop, didn't think about the QT or any lit-up parking lot. I just wanted my own street, my own door locked behind me. I sat on the edge of my bed for a while. The tool chest was still in the truck. I couldn't bring myself to care about it. The next morning I opened Marketplace to find the conversation. Dale H's account was gone. The thread was still there on my end, but his profile was deactivated. His name had been replaced by a gray silhouette. I called the Cherokee County non-emergency line and told the whole thing to a deputy. He took notes. He asked about the headlights, the addresses, the phone ringing in the dark. He didn't sound surprised. He said they'd had similar reports in that stretch of Bartow County over the last couple of months. Marketplace transactions, late pickups, remote addresses, buyers who weren't where they said they were. He said nothing had been confirmed yet. He said confirmed carefully. The way you say a word when you have a theory you can't prove. He took my number, said he'd follow up. He never did. I sold the chest 2 weeks later, $40 in the parking lot of the Home Depot on Ernest Barrett Parkway, 2 in the afternoon. The guy who bought it had 3 verified ratings and a photo of himself holding a fish. I watched him load it into his Tacoma and drive away, and I felt like I could breathe again. I still think about that man on the stoop, the way he stood there. No wave, no word, no pretense of a transaction. He already knew I wasn't coming in. He'd already heard his other phone ring. Meet in a parking lot every single time. The PA clicked on at 11:07, and the voice wasn't Mr. Caldwell's. I want to be clear about that before anything else. I had heard our principal's voice every single morning for 3 years, that flat Ohio drawl, the way he always cleared his throat before speaking. The slight upward lilt at the end of every sentence, like he was always asking a question. This wasn't him. My name is Derek, junior year, 17 years old, second period chemistry at Hargrove High, single building public school in rural Licking County, Ohio, about 600 kids, one main hallway running the length of the building, portables out back for overflow classes, the kind of school where everybody knew everybody and strangers stood out. It was a Tuesday in October, overcast, cold enough that the fields along Route 16 had that gray, flattened look they get before the first hard freeze, completely ordinary, unremarkable, right up until 11:07. Mr. Reyes was our chemistry teacher, mid-40s, salt and pepper beard. He was writing equilibrium equations on the whiteboard when the PA clicked on. The room smelled like dry erase markers and the faint chemical bite from first period that had never fully aired out. The fluorescents buzzed the way they always did. Everything was exactly normal. Then the voice said, "Attention students and staff, this is a lockdown, this is not a drill. Please secure your rooms and await further instruction." Nobody moved for a second. Mr. Reyes set down his marker, slowly. He didn't say anything. He walked to the door and looked through the narrow vertical window into the hallway. Here was the first wrong thing. Our lockdown code wasn't lockdown. The district had switched to a color-coded system 2 years before. Real emergency, condition red; drill, condition yellow. The word lockdown wasn't in the vocabulary anymore. Every kid in that building knew that. Every teacher knew it. I looked around the room. A few other kids had caught it too. Marcus, 2 rows over, was already staring at me. He mouthed, "That's wrong." Mr. Reyes locked the door. He pulled the shade on the door window. Then he moved to the windows along the far wall and closed those blinds one by one without looking at any of us. His jaw was tight. The room got dimmer with each set of blinds. By the time he reached the last window, the only light was the fluorescence overhead, and the room felt smaller than it had 30 seconds ago. "Phones away," he said quietly. "Everybody move to the back wall, sit down on the floor." We did it. 31 kids pressed into the back corner of a chemistry classroom, sitting cross-legged on linoleum, backpacks in laps. The floor was cold through my jeans. Tori was already crying, but without any sound. The kid to my left had gone completely rigid. That particular stillness that means someone is trying very hard not to exist. A minute passed, maybe 2. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not running, walking, slow and deliberate, the kind of pace that means someone is checking each door as they go. No shuffle, no urgency, no radio crackle, none of the ambient noise you'd expect from police presence, just the slow, even sound of soles on linoleum, one after another, getting closer. Mr. Reyes moved flat against the wall beside the door, not in front of it, beside it. I had never seen a teacher do that. My stomach dropped. My phone buzzed, face down in my lap. It was my mom. The text said, "Derek, are you okay? I heard something on Facebook about your school." I stared at that. Facebook. The lockdown had been called maybe 4 minutes ago. Nobody had time to post anything. I didn't understand how she already knew. I didn't text back. The footsteps slowed outside our door. I could see the shadow in the gap underneath it, just standing there, not moving on, still enough that I found myself watching for movement the way you watch something you're not sure is real. The fluorescence hummed. The HVAC ticked somewhere in the ceiling. Down the hall, very faint, I thought I heard a door handle being tried. Then nothing. Nobody in that room breathed. I mean that literally. I watched Marcus put his hand over his mouth. Tori had stopped crying. Everyone went stone still. Then a knock. Not frantic, not distressed. 3 slow knocks, evenly spaced. The kind of spacing that felt almost ceremonial, like whoever was doing it had all the time in the world and knew it. Mr. Reyes did not move. He did not speak. He pressed himself harder against the wall and looked at the floor. The shadow held for another 10 or 15 seconds. Then the footsteps moved on down the hall. I let out a breath so slowly it didn't make a sound. We sat there for 40 minutes. I watched my phone clock. The PA never came back on. No further announcements. No all clear. No second voice. Just the HVAC humming and the occasional creak of the structure settling and sounds from the hallway we couldn't identify and didn't try to. Around the 15-minute mark, the room started to smell like fear sweat. That's a real thing. It's different from exertion sweat, sharper, more acidic. Once I noticed it, I couldn't stop noticing it. Then maybe 20 minutes in, we heard something from the direction of the portables out back. A single loud bang, like a door thrown hard against a wall, the kind of impact that carries and echoes differently in open air. Then nothing, no voices, no follow-up sound, no indication of what caused it or whether anyone responded. The girl beside me, whose name I never got, grabbed my arm. I let her. Mr. Reyes stayed beside the door the entire time. He never went to his desk. He never checked his phone in front of us. Once he looked back at us with an expression I can only call controlled, like he had decided to be calm so he could be calm, and he was spending everything he had on it. It wasn't reassurance. It was discipline. He was holding something back, and he was doing it for us. At 11:49, the PA clicked on again. This time it was Mr. Caldwell, the real voice, the familiar drawl. "Students and staff, we are releasing the condition green. All clear." Condition green, the right code, the right language, the right man. Mr. Reyes unlocked the door. He looked into the hallway for a long moment before he let any of us stand up. Left, then right, then left again. Only then did he step back and hold the door open. His hand on the frame was steady. His knuckles were white. I walked out on legs that didn't feel like mine. The official story came out over the next 2 days. A brief in the Licking County Advocate said law enforcement had responded to a report of a suspicious individual on school grounds. The individual was identified. The situation was resolved without incident. The district letter home said essentially the same thing. What it didn't explain was who made that first announcement. Mr. Caldwell told a parent at pickup that afternoon my friend's mom was standing right there and heard it, that he had not authorized any announcement at 11:07. He said the intercom system had been accessed. They were looking into how. What it didn't explain was who knocked on our door. When I asked Mr. Reyes about it the following week, he went quiet in a specific way. He said the sheriff's office had swept the building. He said everyone in the hallway during the lockdown had been accounted for. He was looking at his desk when he said it. I asked him directly, so who knocked? He didn't answer. He picked up a stack of papers, tapped them against the desk to straighten them, and after a moment he said I should get to my next class. What it didn't explain was that bang from the portable direction. A kid named Will had portable chemistry that period, different class, same subject, back building. He wasn't in school the next week, or the week after. When he came back, he'd transferred into a different second period. I tried to ask him about it once in the parking lot by the Circle K on Route 16, where a group of us usually stopped after school. He looked at me for a second, then he said, "I don't remember that day," and walked away. He wasn't being dismissive, his voice was wrong. It sounded like someone reading from a script. I think about my mom knowing before any announcement went out to parents. She said she saw it on Facebook, but she couldn't show me the post later. She said she couldn't find it again. I think about those 3 slow knocks. If you're law enforcement clearing a building, you don't knock like that. You announce yourself. You identify yourself. You use a specific cadence. 3 slow, evenly spaced knocks with no voice attached. That is not a protocol anyone in emergency response has ever described to me. I think about the face in the door window. I almost left this part out. I've second-guessed it so many times. But in the moment before Mr. Reyes pulled the shade, I was looking at that narrow strip of glass, and there was a face there, a man, older, maybe 50 or 60. He wasn't looking at the door handle. He wasn't moving. He was just looking through the glass into the room. Not at anything specific, at the room, the way you look at a fish tank. His expression is what stays with me, not angry, not agitated, not the wide eyes of someone in crisis, patient, evaluating, the kind of look you give something you have already decided about. I held that eye contact for maybe 2 seconds before the shade came down. I never saw him again. The district letter said the situation was resolved without incident. Maybe that's technically true. Nobody got hurt. We all went home. But something moved through that building. It knew how to use the intercom. It knew where the classrooms were. And 3 slow knocks is not the sound of someone who is lost or confused. I'm 26 now. I work out of a warehouse off I-71 south of Columbus. Most days are fine. But I still flinch when a PA clicks on. On the night I came home and found my back door unlocked, I knew I'd been right for months. My name is Cal, I'm 31. I rent a house on the east side of Scranton, Pennsylvania, a quiet block, mostly older families, a few other renters like me. I work IT support for a medical billing company. Daytime hours, Monday through Friday. My life was about as ordinary as it sounds. I'd lived on Dunmore Street for 2 years before any of this started. I knew my neighbors by face. I knew which dogs barked in the morning and which cars came and went. I wasn't paranoid. I was just the kind of guy who notices things. The first time I saw him, I didn't think much of it. It was a Tuesday in early March, cold, that wet Pennsylvania cold that gets into your coat no matter how thick it is. State Route 347 runs a few blocks west of us, and on still nights you can hear the trucks grinding up toward Dunmore Borough. That night was still. I pulled into my driveway in my Tacoma around 6:15 and noticed a car sitting across the street. Old blue Civic, maybe 2003 or 2004. One person behind the wheel, engine off. I went inside, figured he was waiting for someone. He was still there at 9 when I let my dog, Porter, out in the backyard. The car hadn't moved. The street was empty otherwise, orange-lit under the sodium lamps. That Civic sat in the pool of shadow between 2 of them. That particular spot is darker than the rest of the block. I couldn't see the driver clearly, just a shape. I told myself it was nothing, someone waiting for a friend. Maybe he'd fallen asleep. In the morning, the car was gone. I forgot about it for a while. About 2 weeks later, I came home and found a package on my porch. A book I'd ordered. It had been opened. Not torn open, carefully opened, the tape slit clean along one edge and pressed back down. The book was still inside, nothing missing, but someone had opened it and resealed it. I stood there on my porch turning it over in my hands. The tape had been pressed back so neatly you'd almost miss it. Almost. I called Amazon. They said the package had been delivered sealed. I filed a report. The woman I spoke to suggested maybe a neighbor had picked it up by mistake and returned it. I almost believed that. Then my neighbor Rose, maybe 60, lives 2 houses down, knocked on my door that weekend. She said she'd seen a man in my backyard on Thursday morning. She thought it was me at first, but the more she described him, the less it sounded like me. Shorter, heavier jacket, dark green, like an old army surplus thing, just standing near the fence by the gate, looking up at the windows, not doing anything, just standing there looking up. She watched him for about 3 minutes, then he walked down the alley and she lost sight of him. I thanked her. I went back inside. I checked the gate on the dog run. The latch was lifted, but the gate was still closed. Someone had reached over and unlatched it from outside. Porter was still in the yard. He just never pushed against it. I bought a combination padlock that afternoon and put it on the gate. I remember standing in the backyard after I snapped it shut, looking up at the rear windows of my own house, trying to see what he had seen, trying to understand what he was looking for. I couldn't figure it out. That bothered me more than anything else so far. After that, I started paying attention. The blue Civic showed up 3 more times over the next 6 weeks. Always the same spot, roughly across and 1 house down in that darker gap between the lamp pools. Engine never running. One time I walked toward it. I didn't get within 20 feet before it started up and pulled away. No squeal of tires, no rush, just a calm, deliberate pull from the curb, like he'd been expecting me to come out and had decided that was enough for one night. I got a partial plate, wrote it down. Then in April, a coworker named Diane pulled me aside in the break room. She said a man had called the front desk the week before asking about me. Not asking for me, asking about me, where I sat, what hours I worked. The receptionist had flagged it with HR. HR had dropped me a note I hadn't thought much of. Diane said the man's voice was calm, very polite, said he was an old friend trying to reconnect. I didn't have old friends who didn't know my number. I went back to HR and read that note again. I filed a report with Scranton PD that evening. The officer was decent. He took down the partial plate, took down the dates, but he told me carefully that nothing had technically happened yet. He said to keep documenting. I started a log, dates, times, descriptions, locations. I kept it on my phone and backed it up every night. Then in late April, I came home to a white envelope on my porch, my name on the front in neat block letters, no return address. Inside was a photograph. It was me taken from across the street from some distance. I was standing in my front doorway, coffee in hand, wearing the blue hoodie I wear when I don't care how I look. The timestamp in the corner was from 3 weeks earlier. I sat down on the porch step. The evening was mild. The street was completely ordinary around me. A kid on a bike at the far end of the block, somebody's wind chimes moving in a slow breeze, the smell of someone grilling a few houses down. All of it normal. And I was sitting there holding a photograph of myself in a Ziploc bag I'd put it in without thinking. The way you do when some part of your brain has already understood something the rest of you is still catching up to. It didn't hit me slowly, it hit me all at once. Someone had been close enough to get a clean shot through a long lens. Someone had printed it. Someone had walked up to my door and left it there as a message. Not a threat exactly, just proof that they could. I kept looking at the photograph, at the patience it implied. Whoever took it had waited, had set up somewhere across the street and waited for me to appear in my own doorway, completely unaware. Then they'd printed it, put it in an envelope, written my name in block letters, and walked it to my door. That was the moment. That was when I stopped telling myself I was overreacting. I drove to the police station that night. I didn't take a report over the phone. I walked in. I brought the photograph in its Ziploc bag. I brought my log. I brought the partial plate. The detective I spoke to was a woman named Kessler. She looked at the photograph for a long time without saying anything. The station was quiet, just the hum of the fluorescent lights and someone's radio down the hall. She turned the bag over, looked at the timestamp, looked at me. She said, "You've been keeping records. That's good. Keep doing it." She ran the partial plate against the vehicle description. A few days later, she called me back. There was a man, I won't use his name, who had a prior complaint filed against him by a woman in Dunmore for similar behavior. Nothing had ever been charged, but the car matched. I didn't wait for them to figure it out. I called a locksmith the next morning and had both doors rekeyed. New deadbolts front and back. I bought a Simply Safe system and had it up within a day. 2 cameras outside, one over the front door, one covering the driveway and the side of the house. I pointed the driveway camera so it picked up most of the street as well. I tested the angles twice, walked my property in the dark to see exactly what each camera caught and what it missed. My friend Derek came and stayed for 5 nights. He slept in the second bedroom. I can't explain exactly what it meant to have another person in the house, but it mattered. The sounds of another person, footsteps in the hallway, the bathroom faucet, the creak of the bed frame pulled the silence back to something manageable. I slept. The cameras caught the Civic again on the third night, 2:14 in the morning. It drove past slow, almost stopped, then kept going. I watched the footage the next morning with my coffee cooling beside me. You could see the brake lights flare and hold right in front of my house, then ease off. I had the full plate this time, make and model clear in the frame. I watched it 3 times. I sent the footage to Detective Kessler by 8 in the morning. 3 days later, she called to tell me he'd been picked up. Between the prior complaint, the photograph, the security footage, and some additional information I wasn't given details on, they had enough. He was charged with stalking and criminal use of a communication facility. I later learned he'd found me through a mutual connection on social media, someone from a gym I'd gone to years back. I barely knew the person, that's all it took. He pled down, 2 years of probation, a restraining order, and a mandatory mental health evaluation. I stayed in that house for another 4 months, then I moved, not because I thought he'd come back, I just wanted a new address, a new routine, somewhere no one had photographs of my doorway. That was 14 months ago, things have been quiet. But I still run my cameras, I still keep the second deadbolt turned, not out of fear exactly, more out of understanding. Don't talk yourself out of what you're noticing.